All right, another podcast at the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. Me and Colleen Triezenberg have been sitting here having all kind of dialogue about life, about being parents, about, just so many facets that people face. So I'm super excited for this conversation.
Thank you for having me today. Super pumped just to talk about my experiences that have led me to who I am today. Simply enough, I was born in Novi, Michigan, so not too far away from here. 3 siblings, and I always tell people I am the middle child because I have an older sibling and the 2 younger twins. So I very much played the role of the middle child in so many senses, but we are a very close-knit family. I played many sports growing up. I was more of the athletic one in the family in terms of just having the sports, trying different things out. So my true passion truly was sticking with soccer, and that was more of what my focus was on growing up in my entire life. So the root of it all, though, is very family-oriented, a lot of great memories. My mom and dad, full-time jobs. So my mom was a teacher, but had summers off, so spent a lot of time with us during the summer months. We went camping up north in Traverse City, down to Ohio, where my dad's side of the family was from. So we did a lot of things together as a unit. And then my dad was a sales engineer, so he traveled a little bit, but I think he pretty much was at every sporting game or every other event for my siblings. So we had and still do have a very close-knit family.
Wow. Do you remember where the athletic drive came from for you? Like, was your older sibling an athlete, or where did that competitive nature that you clearly have? I mean, you just ran the Boston Marathon and we were talking about some of your goals. Mm-hmm. Where did that competitive nature come from? Were you just born with it?
I think for me, for one, I think I was definitely born with it. I mean, I use the term loosely, but definitely a tomboy growing up. Definitely more of my friends were the guys. I played flag football during recess, basketball, soccer. So I think, though, my core group of girlfriends, they got into soccer when we were younger. So naturally, I wanted to stick with them. So I think that was the sport that stuck. But I think I've always had that inner competitiveness. Like for me, maybe it is a middle child, but more so like doing everything I can so much for, in a way, attention in the sense of like, hey, like, look, I'm good at this. But I think that it was just that inner drive I was always born with.
What are the things that you think sports did for your life? Like being a part of a team, having a coach, having people to push you. Like, how do you think that shaped you as a young child?
Oh, a confidence, absolutely. To pick a sport up and learn the different skills and technique necessary to take that step forward. During my time frame, especially my age, so I'm 35, so born in 1988. The 90s were such a time stamp. Where at least for soccer, really took off for that age range of like, okay, so you did rec soccer, but as soon as you're 8, you should be immediately into a club team. So for me, I think I was, and my parents always gave me that choice. My dad's like, do you enjoy this? Is this something that you want to do? And at the time, 8, 9 years old, like, okay, I'm in it. I'm here. Like, I'm focused. I'm not maybe the best out there. But for me, like that confidence and independence and autonomy, right? That soccer gave me as a young girl, truly.
Do you remember what you first wanted to be when you got older? Like when you're growing up, you're playing sports. Do you remember what your first goal was?
Okay, so did you watch the 1999 World Cup?
I did.
Mia Hamm, Michelle Akers. I could name the whole squad. Okay, so for me, my goal was to be a pro athlete. In the middle of the night, so at that time I was reading, when I was that age, I read Michelle Akers' book, which she talked about how she would practice 24/7. So when my siblings were fast asleep, my parents were fast asleep, I would literally sneak down to the basement and just practice soccer. And so for me, it was one of those things that was always on my mind, and I always envisioned myself to play. I mean, at that time to play professional soccer and make the World Cup team and all that. I mean, they were our idols when growing up, like Mia Hamm, Michelle Akers, Brandy Chastain, Brianna Scurry. All those females like really paved a way for female soccer players at that time.
And really in the 90s, we had a lot of admiration for high-level athletes. Like, I mean, there were so many athletes that kind of shaped culture and society. Little boys and little girls looked up to these people, and they're like, wow, these are superheroes. Like, how do I become like that? I don't know. You don't know much of my background, but like my family, my mother passed away when I was young, but her sister basically like stepped in and played the role of my mother, my Aunt Diane. And she was a college soccer player. My uncle was a college soccer player over in England. Or he played soccer in England, then he played soccer here in college. And they both ended up being soccer coaches, and then all 5 kids played soccer. So soccer was like massive around my childhood. And I remember like when the World Cup would come on. I mean, it's smaller in the United States than it is in most places, but it was like a global spectacle. So when you're a child and you're looking at something like that and you're thinking, is there a possibility that could be me? That's magic. I tell a lot of people that I work with now, like, you need to go back to your imagination like it was when you were a kid. When you have a goal, when you have something you want to do in your life, when you have something you want to become, you got to tap back into that feeling of when you were a kid, you could picture what it would be like to be Mia Hamm out there on that field. When she scored a goal, you could almost feel in your soul what it would feel like if that was you scoring that goal. That is a superpower because life is so hard and the acquisition of high-level things is so difficult that you have to inspire your soul or spirit or whatever it is with something that's going to get you through the hardship. One of the ways to do that is remember the feelings that you had when you had an astronomical goal as a kid and how bad you're like, oh man, like I want that in my future. That type of feeling can pull you through the difficult. It can be the reason you get out of bed in the morning and why you're willing to strive and push forward. At what point in time did you lose that? Because I'm hearing this story that tells me, why is Colleen not out in the MLS right now and playing? But life gets difficult and life gets in the way. At what point did it start to veer off course?
Honestly, I don't think it has, because even though that end goal changed, it's still the same drive. So for me, I got to my goal. I mean, I played. So for me, from little to college, like my goal is to play Division I soccer. So that was my goal at that time of, hey, if I can't make the Olympic team or the World Cup team, at least I'm reaching my full potential. So I did. So
So the vision changed from I'm going to make it to the MLS to like I'm going to play Division I soccer.
Yes.
And you achieved that.
Yes.
What caused it to change though from the belief of MLS to Division I college soccer?
No, that's a great question. So I think it was just more what was attainable. So there's different tiers in soccer. So for me, it's all that like the staying the course, staying the path. So for me, I for club soccer, so made the team that I needed to make to advance. And then have you ever heard of ODP before? Olympic Development Program. So it's different now. There's all different terminologies and different paths now for soccer players. It's wild. It's a very competitive pool now. Then it was pretty straightforward. It was steps. So if you make your state ODP level team, you go to the Midwest, and then you go to national camp. And then the national camp is where they really start to pull the team. So I made it all the way up to the regional team at one point. And unfortunately, they flat out told me, you're too small. So you won't be able to move on to the national team. But great, you got great skill, great technique, set your eyes towards maybe college soccer if that's what you really want to pursue. So I was told too small at that time. And for me, I knew then, okay, next best bet or next step would be college soccer, right? And so for me, I was told, though, there's no way you're going to play Division I. You're too small. And I'm a goalkeeper. I didn't play field. I'm a goalkeeper. So for me, when I was at ODP team, like tryouts and whatnot, 5'4", if that, with cleats, maybe. I mean, now recruiting, I would always write 5'5", just to give myself some extra inches, but there's no way. And so for me, it was about proving those people wrong. Once again, inner drive, and that stems from my childhood. Being told, okay, you're not quick enough, you're not skilled enough, all these things. And so that was the reason why I was in the basement practicing these skills, getting better. I did start soccer at a later point, club-wise. I had friends who were in club soccer or club training since the age of like 5, 6. It was wild. And so for me, starting at 8 and 9 technically you were a little bit behind the ball. You still have some catching up to do. And so for me, it was proving them up wrong to that point. And then, getting to the point of like being able to play Division I soccer. So it did transition because I was told in certain circumstances. So for me, it was like, okay, what's the next best thing that I can actually achieve?
That makes sense. And honestly, there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said, that like people are going to tell you all kind of things in your life, but you determine whether those thoughts like permeate through to your belief system. And you got to have that confidence in yourself that when people look at you and say, you're not going to be successful, you're not going to be able to reach your goals, you're not going to attain what you want, you're never going to be rich or whatever it is that you're seeking, you can't let it permeate to the point where you believe it. You have to say, watch this, I'll prove you wrong. And some of the biggest fuel I ever had in my life, sounds like you're saying the same story, was people telling me that I couldn't do something. And that's like when we were speaking a lot before the podcast about this generation, we need to give them that type of resiliency that like when they hear mean or harsh words, or they're told like, you're not good right now, you're cut from the team, it's so devastating to them, because if you make the environment too soft, you're not ready for hardships like that. Versus when you're told something that the person that is trying to tell you this is your potential doesn't really know your potential, because they are not you. But you've got to cultivate that belief. You've got to manifest that courage. You've got to bring together and say, you think that I can't play Division I soccer because I'm 5'4"? Wait, you know what? I can't wait to call you when I make the team and I'm out there on the field. And then you probably feel 10 times better being on that Division I soccer team. You have more gratitude. You're more grateful to be there because someone tried to tell you, Colleen, that's not possible for you. You should just give up. You should be satisfied with this level. People need to realize you are not defined by other people's words unless you allow it to imprison you. And that's like huge wisdom. And it's great to tell children. It's like you need to set out on a path that you believe in with your heart. And you need to go all out for those things. And if you do that, you will shatter the expectations of not only other people, but for yourself. And like that right there is a really important part of your story, because there's a Colleen that hears those words like you're this, you're that just quits soccer, that says, you know what, if I'm putting all this energy in, there's no way that I can attain my goals, and I really wanted to play, I guess I'll just do something else with myself then. And instead, you get to sit here and say, I played Division I soccer because I believed that I could. So let's continue to unfold your story.
Yeah, well, and I want to add on to that, because I think one of the most defining moments of my childhood was getting cut from that ODP team. I remember sitting in that group and my name not being called for the first time, because usually I'm on that team. I'm on that next step, and that was what I was used to. So it was the first time that I had experienced, I'm not moving forward. And so I had two choices. Okay, I took the day. Of course, I remember I had a friend's birthday party later. I was, I think, 8th or 9th grade at that point, so still young. And I stayed home. I remember taking the day and like taking that time of like reflecting, like I was a mess. But I could have quit and been like, forget this. They don't know me. I'm done. Or, okay, fine. Okay, what's my next challenge? And so that's something, at least, and I know we can talk about this more down the road here, but that's what I want to show for my two boys, that there will be hardships. There will be plenty of no's, especially in this day of age. There's going to be a lot of doors closed. And so it's like, okay, but how do you work around that? How do you persevere and become someone different despite of what people are telling you you're not going to be?
So what made you take that road? Because the road was right there in front of you. And it's very easy to quit. Mm-hmm. It's probably the easiest thing in the world to just say, okay, I'll put no more effort in that direction because it's obviously not going to pay off. What made you take the other direction?
I probably will get emotional, but my parents, honestly, my mom, she's been in my corner since day one. And so for me, she it's so funny, she rarely swears, but I remember her being like, we don't give, basically don't give a shit what they're saying. Like, you got this. Like, I know who you are, and let's continue. We'll just keep working. And even my dad was at every single soccer game. And so for me, having an example, like, that's what I want for my kids. Like, when they come to me with like an issue of like something like, hey, I'm not, I just got cut from my basketball team, or I'm not excelling in jiu-jitsu, or whatever that may be. It's like, okay, but let's work through this. And it's a team, it's a unit, and I believe you can't do it alone. A lot of the times you need that support. So honestly, I think if it wasn't for my parents in my corner telling me, no, like, you're doing great, let's continue, you got this, on to the next, maybe I would have quit.
No, yeah, that hit my heartstrings as you were telling it because that's like what I believe every kid deserves. Not every kid gets, but like, man, having people that have your back, especially your parents, that their love comes through in a way where it's like they're going to push for the best for you and they believe in you. And they don't just write you off and say, oh, well, I guess you're not good enough. You find something else. I mean, that happens to some kids. Like you had parents that were like, no, you're more than what that coach sees. That moment doesn't define you. What'll define you will be what you do because of that moment. So you go to college. What do you go to college for? What did you think you were going to be in like the working world? What are the other aspirations you have in life? What does your life look like when you're in college, et cetera?
Yeah, so I think what was cool, so growing up, I grew up in Novi. I actually transferred high schools after my freshman year. So at that time, Novi was growing. I think my graduating class was like 600 to 700, and I felt very lost. Like I felt like I couldn't find my voice after my freshman year. And even though like I was on the varsity team, I had a group of friends, I just felt like something wasn't clicking. And so I ended up transferring to Detroit Country Day. I had a bunch of my friends with club soccer, and I felt really connected and driven towards like being like in that group because they were going to push me, even academically. And so I ended up getting recruited by Loyola in Chicago. But my parents were really focused on finding a school that also was equally strong academically. So that institution has a really great education pathway and good, I mean, Division I soccer, good, great program, great coaches at that time, still at this time. And so I think it was a dual thing because I know, hey, I'm not going to be playing soccer forever. So what does that path look like after the college years? So I think like for me, finding that perfect fit was a rare opportunity, but I felt like it went the right path because I can't even imagine going to another college institute as prepared as I was after my senior year.
So did you take a certain major? Did you think, what were you going to do when you got out of college? Like, because, okay, you're playing Division I soccer. You don't really think there's a next step, but you're enjoying yourself. You're having a blast. You're around your girls. You're growing. You're building, but you're now about to, like, in a weird way, school is like the tutorial mode of life. And like right when you get out of school, it's kind of like, all right, go create your life. And did you have any plans for that? Were you just kind of you know what, I'll handle it when it comes? Take me back to the Colleen that's 22, 23. Like, what's your outlook for the world?
Yeah, I absolutely had zero idea, to be honest, in the sense of, so I went to school for advertising, public relations, and marketing. My whole goal was to work at like a Nike, Adidas, like a big marketing firm. I was really creative in that sense of like, I love ad campaigns. I love creating marketing material, communication, all of that. I definitely excelled in that. But once again, it was like the feeling of like, but those companies are so massive. Like, where will I be able to find my own voice and all that? I'm telling a story for somebody else, like a Nike, like an Adidas, like a Puma. But okay, is that something that I could really see myself like finding who I am going to be in all of this? And so I graduated. And then honestly, this is a whole like different section of, or I guess department of my life. But my sister, Caitlin, she was diagnosed with diabetes and celiac at a very young age. And we sent her during the summer months to camps. And so for her, she found her independence, how to manage her disease, friendships, all these things. And for me, my whole life, I've only experienced athletics, sport camps, and during the summer months, like focusing on soccer practice, all those things. I never took a summer for like to myself to really focus on who I am, like aside from being an athlete. And so I actually ended up working at a camp on the East Coast. Like I took the summer. I didn't have a job lined up, but they hired me as like a seasonal staff member. And that sort of created the next path, the next opportunity. Because before I went to the East Coast in New Hampshire, they sent me to New York City to a local sports department called E3 Sports, where I got my personal training certification. So that is how I fell into the personal training side of things. So I went to a co-ed camp on the East Coast, middle of nowhere, New Hampshire, and I was their fitness instructor for the summer months. And that same company hired me after I was done there at summer camp, and I lived in New York City for a full year. But that's where I fell into. It's a smaller sports company. I was personal training high schoolers and elderly citizens, our senior center, and then I was doing all their marketing and all that. So that's kind of where I fell in love when it came to like training people and that passion. If I couldn't play soccer anymore, I could at least channel and help those kids find their own passion in life, whether it was training for soccer or in the gym, etc.
So really, I mean, you kind of fell right into your next life's passion. That's impressive. A lot of people go through a time or a period where they're very lost and they're not sure, like, what am I supposed to do now? What do I do next? Like, whenever one chapter closes, that can be really difficult for people because you lose a sense of identity. You were a soccer player your whole life, and you still are. You carry it with you. But like, if you don't start rewriting a new chapter and you start to get more distance from what you were, it can be really difficult psychologically. It sounds like life just rewarded you. It walked you into your next passion. Did you know right when you started training people that like, this is what I want to do? Or did it grow over time as you were training people more and more, you're like, wow, because you see people get results, you see people light up. Like so many people that are struggling in their lives or they're unhappy, you should try to make someone else's life better and watch how much that actually affects your life. Like when you pour into other people, it pours into you. It's a formula that trainers get, but a lot of people don't understand. It's like when you give energy out in this universe and it affects people positively, their reaction or just their growth automatically feeds back into you. And then it's a cycle, you know what I mean? And that allows you to be even more than what you were. And then did you find that initially, or did that love grow over time?
I think it definitely grew over time. I think for me, being 22, 23, how old you are when you graduate, it was, like you said, finding a new identity. Yeah, all I knew was soccer and playing sports and my teammates, and all of a sudden we all were different areas, different past careers in the United States. And so for me, being in the largest city basically in the United States, like New York City, I was in Manhattan, Upper East Side. And for me, it felt like I had to keep up with the social crowd and make the money to pay my rent and to do my job correctly and learning first real job out of college. And so I think it was a learning curve, but I think what brought me joy and happiness at that time, because I certainly wasn't happy in the city. I moved back after a year. It was a great learning opportunity, but I think the one thing that got me through was training, especially the high schoolers. That was fun. That was awesome because they're young. They ask a million questions of like, how did you get here? Or what type of advice would you give me if I was looking to do this? And so I saw myself a lot in some of those young athletes. And so that was cool. Like you said, pouring into them, training them long hours, nights on Ellis Island, doing soccer training, things like that. That was cool. So that brought me joy. So when I moved back to Michigan, I knew, okay, like at least this is the area I could excel in somewhere else.
That makes sense, 100%. So one thing I want to ask is, it's almost like your middle child aspect has followed you your whole life. Being in a big city, is it like you don't feel like you can make enough of an impact and you're kind of swallowed by the population? And, I'm looking at parallels in your story. Like you want to be seen. You want to be the one on the field. You want your parents to be like, hey, look at me. Like I'm making a difference. When you're training people, you can directly see the results. In a New York City, you are you're one in a million, and there's a million people trying to hustle. Do you think that was overwhelming your psychology at the time?
Yeah, I think actually you nailed it. I didn't even think about it that way. It's the same circumstance in high school, but on a larger scale, right? Like, oh gosh, I can't make an impact here. This is not, or at least for me, like I won't be able to find my voice among all these people.
Think about
here.
that. Your story has that exact parallel from your childhood to wanting to be seen and noticed and like acknowledged for what you bring to the world. And then in the high school you went to, wanting to be in a spot where you were able to shine a little bit brighter. And then the city is a little bit too much, but you found the training that you love because you get the one-on-one interaction. You get to see your efforts pay off. The parallel in your story is really stood out to me as you've told it. So you come back home. Did you live by yourself when you were out in New York, by the way?
I had 3 roommates. Yeah, so I lived, but it was one of those things, found them like on Craigslist, right? Throwback to Craigslist. Yes, they were looking for a roommate. moved in. I was in Queens, so I wasn't even in Manhattan. I had to take the Q line all the way in. They were awesome and supportive, but just strangers. I just moved in and was like, hey, I'm here. What's up? So it was a unique experience.
In the world, I mean, that's how we lived and how we came up. Like I had several roommates at a period. I mean, they were friends of mine, but it's like when you think about your kids and like protecting them from the world, you're like, what do you mean you found roommates off Craigslist and you don't know these people and you're going to live with them? It's like you got to remember so much of what you're proud of within yourself came from, like some of the things that might not be advisable or some of the difficulties. Like difficulty is good for you. Some experiences that we might try to shield our children from might actually make them step into their own. When you're living with a couple strangers and you got to be on your game a little bit more and you got to do this, that, and the other thing, it's not the same as like just living at home and working a job where there's not very much stress. You don't have a dynamic with these people of different backgrounds and stuff that are all trying to make it. These things are good for you. It's good for you to grow like that. So you come back home, you're like 24, 25. Do you immediately pick up training again?
Yeah. So moved home back in Novi with my parents until I could afford my own place. I was a coach for Novi Jaguars, which is a soccer club in Novi. It is the club I grew up in, basically, so all the same coaches were there. That was cool. So came back, did that, picked up a part-time position at the Parks and Recreation. So I was in charge of all the youth sports. So just being in New York and coaching and doing that, I'm like, hey, I could actually lead these programs. I can create these programs for these kids. And then I had another job as a part-time barista at a local Caribou Coffee. So I had 3 jobs at once, living at home. But for me, it was all about working hard and finding that next step. And so I loved it. It was an awesome time. I was able to do all these different things and make a living, but doing something I actually loved and enjoyed at that time.
Now you're single at this part of your life? It's because it sounds like where do you fit a relationship into that piece? So you're just grinding, you're hustling, you're working towards your goals. Do you have any like vision or aspirations of like how this is going to unfold? Or are you just in the grind at that point? You're working your 3 jobs, you're training people, you're hustling, you're making money, you're saving up, and you're kind of like just willing to let life unfold as it happens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I dated, but really didn't have anyone serious on the side. And so, I mean, Nathan was all in good time. So my husband right now, but I
want to know where he comes into the mix, but it hasn't happened yet.
No, it has not happened. Have not met him. That's a crazy story. So I had my 3 jobs. At that time, my supervisor at Novi was my mentor. And she was, at that time, having a master's degree. Like now everybody has a master's degree, but at that time it was very limited. So she's like, look, like you're very talented at what you're doing. You can go back and get your master's in what is recreation management. So, I mean, Parks and Recreation, you can find a Parks and Rec department any city you go to. And so she goes, you'll immediately separate yourself just having a master's degree. So I ended up, under her guidance, I ended up getting a full ride to North Carolina State University. Didn't have to pay a dime for my master's. I had a graduate assistantship through the North Carolina Park and Recreation Association. I was their wellness initiator initiator coordinator, some fancy title. And I was there for the 2 years. And I also had a part-time job at Park Med, which was a professional soccer park. So I was a coordinator there. So I once again had 2 jobs, went to school, got my master's, and then during that time frame is when I actually met Nathan. Yeah, so he came into play at a wedding. So my best friend from college, she played soccer with me at Loyola, married his best friend from childhood, and we met at their wedding. And so we did long distance for 2 years when I was getting my master's in North Carolina.
Wow. So, I mean, it must have been a huge spark for you two to like, you just meet at one wedding and then you start dating and you're willing to go right into long distance. Long distance is incredibly difficult, but it also in a certain way, by longing for someone and like being so happy to for the day you'll be able to see them again, there can be benefits of it too. You know what I mean? Sometimes you take for granted the person that's right next to you all the time. You know what I mean? And like, you don't see them in the light that you should. And, so you guys met. What is Nate doing at this time? Is he already military?
Yeah, so in law enforcement gang unit, he was training down in Georgia, so he was only a couple hours from me. So what we would do, we explored the East Coast. We visited Charleston and Savannah. I mean, at that time, no kids, masters. I mean, really, it's a part-time school, so it's not like I'm in school every day. So we did a lot of exploring, a lot of traveling. That certainly made it easier. But believe me, our communication skills are on point. The amount of times I don't think it's so funny. One of the things that we tell people, I don't think there's a day yet that we've missed talking with each other. Like, we built such a base when we were doing long distance and being communicative, which is such a strong thing for our relationship. But we have talked every single day since 2014 meeting. It's wild.
That's incredible, and it was manageable distance. Like, I had a relationship that was long distance, but it was 10-hour drive, like, or 9.5 hour. That's not manageable. And when you're a teenager, like, you can't just jump on a flight and go see the person. So long distance means, like, you can't see them. And it's not like the technology now where, like, we didn't have that, where you just pop on the phone and pull up an iPad and you can look at the person and see them. No, like, you're on a phone, you know what I mean, trying to talk to someone, but you were close enough that you could actually see them and spend time with them. So that's definitely huge. So you get to be so excited. And then when you spend your time together, you cherish the time. Then you go back in your lives and you keep grinding. So how do you end up back in Michigan then? Like, what brings you back here? Is it after you graduate? And then now you two are so into fitness and goals, and, like, you share the energy that I have and a lot of people in this community have. And it's so cool that we've crossed paths, but start to unfold how that all comes together.
Yeah, so he had an opportunity at being back in the Midwest. So he applied for a couple positions in Michigan, Chicago, and I think Indiana. And so by luck, we ended up back here in Michigan. His first placement was in Flint, so totally by chance. So he said, I guess we're moving back to Michigan, which was awesome because I have a lot of good friends here. My family's here, and he has friends here as well, too. So we moved back. And so that kind of unfolded where I landed a Parks and Recreation job right away in Highland.
Did you move into Flint or did you move into another city?
Brighton, Michigan.
Brighton.
Right, yeah, down, right where we're at.
Where we are now.
Yes, sitting apartment, nice place. So he just commuted to Flint. So I was in Highland, he was working in Flint, and so I think from there it just kind of started unfolding where where he wanted to get his personal training certification and stuff. He's always been active. Like, he played basketball at Calvin. He grew up with a very active family, track, like, same very much pathway. Like, his parents were at every single game, same experience, same, like, support system. So I think that really played a huge role with him in terms of, like, even the parent he is today, and very involved, showing up, like, just being there. And so I think that was a very right away common theme with our life of, like, just having that background, because his life was basketball. I mean, talk about iconic athletes and role models at the time, Michael Jordan, him being from Chicago. So for him, that's what he knew growing up. And so I think we fueled off of each other. I mean, we were working out every morning before work. It's just one of those things that that was a common shared passion of ours. And so how I got into running was when my brother-in-law, he ended up passing away from leukemia or lymphoma. And so that was back the same year we got married, Nathan and I. So that was back in 2016. And at that time, I was only training people, worked at the Parks and Recreation. I wasn't really running yet. Like, I was doing more workouts on my own. And I felt like I needed to do something for after my brother-in-law passed away. And so that's where the Chicago Marathon came into play. One of my friends was like, hey, did you know that if you run the Chicago Marathon, you can raise money for the Lymphoma and Leukemia Society? And so I ended up raising money for my brother-in-law, but that is where I really fell into the pathway of running and using it more as a competitive sport. And that's where I refound and regained a different passion for, like, what I had for soccer. Now is really focused onto the whole marathon running and all on that whole sport arena.
It probably felt so good to have, like, that flame in your heart come back, because that's what happens. Like, if you loved soccer when you were a kid, you had that feeling that made you feel alive, that made you want to work hard, that made you want to strive for something. And if you now find it again as an adult, it brings out your best again. Is that what you were experiencing?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so when I was handed, so when you sign up for a fundraiser like that for a marathon, they'll hand you, like, a training packet, because I had no idea. I mean, I just ran for fun before, and training for a marathon is a whole different ball game when it comes to nutrition and running, like, like the mileage you have to do every week. And so for me, when I was looking at that packet, it was like preseason all over again, right? Here's your training schedule. This is when you need to wake up. This is what you need to be eating. Here's your first preseason game. And so like the fact that I now had like this packet, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like a true athlete again. And so Nathan was fully on board, supported basically because that's a lot of hours to dedicate to train. And we didn't have kids at that time, but I was able to really dive into that sport and transition. And so that kind of paired nicely of what I was doing anyways. And so Nathan's not a runner. He's more of a CrossFit kind of guy. But he's the one that will throw a backpack on and be there at every mile marker if he needed to be for me.
That's amazing. And it's enough common ground that it works out great, but you also have your little like segments of it, which is great too. You get to shine as the runner and he has his own avenue that you can support each other through a mutual thing. It's fitness in general. When does, it sounds like you're around upper 20s at this point, right? You're coming up on 30. When do you really start going into like, I want to launch my own training brand? And I don't want to skip much of your story, but like nowadays I see you two as like Triezenberg Training. Like I see something coming to fruition here that I think you two, especially with the differences and similarities you both share, like you can really build an incredible community that has different aspects of the training. When does that start to come to life? When do you start like looking at what he's doing, what you're doing, the training you've done in the past, and start to be like, wait a second, can we have like our family leading a training program? Is that a little down the road or?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before that even came into play, we had Caden, so back in 2017. So I think it was, okay, family first, like building that up. Let's get that going. I think I had Caden when I was, 30, 31. He's 5, so 30 years old. So about a year and a half, 2 years after Nathan and I got married. And so that obviously newborn stage and all that. And then the lovely year of COVID. So when we had Huddy was 2020. And so I think for me, at that point in time, it was I was working at Selkra here in Brighton at that time. I had a huge promotion. I moved over there. I was leading youth and recreation programs, heading that. Nate was still doing law enforcement. And so I think it was a good, nice balance doing all that. And then I landed a position at University of Michigan called North Star Reach. And it was a nonprofit that raised funds to send kids to camp for free who have serious medical challenges. So everything from like epilepsy, neurology, or cardiovascular diseases, all those sickle cell. So we would send kids to camp for free, and I was putting on the programming for these kids. So that sucked up a lot of my time in terms of during the summer months and like planning and whatnot. So I wasn't really training people on the side at that point anymore. I was like trying to really dedicate that. But when COVID hit, we shut down. Unfortunately, the camp closed. And so it was like, oh gosh, like now what? What do I need to do? Or what should I be doing? And so
take me really through that moment, because that's a huge shakeup.
Oh, yeah.
You're now in a routine. You have something that you're doing that sounds very, very meaningful, that you like to pour your passion into. You got a job. Things are going well. You got little boys at home. Like, I mean, life is really working out well for you. And then 2020 kind of rocked the entire world. Really take me through that moment and how it like altered the course that you were on, or what changes were made in that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things happened. For one, they kept, even though camp closed, they kept a couple people on staff. And since I was one of the higher ups, I had my job, but we weren't doing much of anything. It was more of like recovery mode, finding donors and trying to keep at least the funds live, like paying back, certain things that we needed to pay back on for the camp. And so at that time, it was, well, when's the other shoe going to drop? Like, when am I going to lose my job? So I started looking for a job right away. And it's actually the current job I have right now. But I knew I had to find a job that would allow me to introduce back training people too. So it's like, okay, I have this opportunity. I don't think this camp is going to reopen anytime soon, and still not open. So I made the right decision to make the jump, even though I loved it. Like, it was a huge passion of mine. And part of what my master's is recreation management. So my dream at that time, when North Star Reach was running, was to own North Star, or like run North Star Reach, become the camp director and be part of that mission. It's under the umbrella called Serious Fun Camps, and Paul Newman funded it. And so there are different camps across America, and we are one of, I think, like 9 or 10 serious fun camps. So my goal was to become part of that network, right? And like my kids were at camp with me, they were active and all these things, and so I had that going on. But when that closed, Nate's like, okay, so you have the opportunity to find a job that might be a little more flexible. Do you want to train people again? And so that was when the world was shut down, I got my NASM Personal Training certification, my nutrition coach, and my women's fitness focus. And he's like, okay, let's do this thing. And so I started doing more like virtual stuff. And then I found my current position that I have at the University of Michigan. So I work for the Ross School of Business, but it's called the Weiser Center for Real Estate. And I love it. It's fantastic. I work with college-age kids, helping find their passion in the real estate realm. It's kind of random compared to what I do on the side, but it's a good split of like something that I'm still directing and helping kids find their passion and what direction they want to go to after college. So it's cool, but it gives enough flexibility that I can have Team Triez Training on the side. And so that led me to finding initially a personal training spot at 45. It was in Brighton, right here at Green Oak Village. And Neith's like, you got to apply. Go coach twice a week. You got to get back in that arena. I know how much you love working with other people. Perfect opportunity. And so I worked there. The director, Dom, she's amazing. She was great. So my job was really flexible. I trained there Tuesday, Thursdays, twice a week. Good income on the side. I was doing what I was passionate about, was only there a couple hours in the evening after the kids were in bed. So didn't really miss out on my kid time. But last summer they shut down because due to financial losses. And so that is where I had this huge opportunity in terms of like, okay, at 45 just shut down. What do I do? And so that was where I last fall I started Team Triez Training. So it hasn't even been a year yet.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy. So you're in the first year of building, and you have a loyal group of followers. I see the people that show up for you, and it's in its infancy. Like, that's really impressive. Because I just saw your story the other day, all those women in there working and training. I'm like, man, this is like, it takes people a long time. Or like, you have to have a magnetism about you. You have to have a gravitational pull that people are like, man, like, I just feel good when I'm around that person. I really want to be, around them more for training. And you look like if you would have asked me, I would have thought you were training that group for 5 years, like, just because of the dynamic that you have. So you're in last fall. Yeah. You make this switch. Yeah, bring me up to the present day.
Yeah, absolutely. So the cool thing is I also partner with, I'm a Phorm advisor. So Phorm is a supplement and athletic performance company. So it's really cool. So I've been with them since last January, or last March. So I just came up on the 1 year. And that gave me a support. I do weekly nutrition training through them. I do weekly calls with my coach. And so he actually guided the entire process. So he was with me when I first began at 45. And then he was the one that was like, look, like, this is your brand too as well. You can be so much more, like, you're doing a lot right now, but have you ever thought of creating your own training? Like, I can see what you can do. And so that belief in an outsider and a coach, because Nathan always was encouraged me of doing this. And I just was afraid to make that jump and that leap. I'm like, no, I got F45. I'm good. And my coach, Nick, at that time was like, just find a space. I know you can do it on your own as well too. Like, if you create your own brand and your own training, like, your hours are flexible, you can create your own schedule, you can create your own clientele and attract the people that build your community. And so I had that belief on that outside source. So when F45 closed, I remember driving on the way home, calling Nick, and I was like, all right, Nick, F45 is done. We got notified on a Wednesday that we were closed that Friday. We had 3 days, basically 2 days, Thursday, Friday, tell our members, sorry, but we're closed. So it was all based on finances. And then anyway, so when F45 closed, Nick's like, look, like, you have all the contacts, you can talk to them. Like, what do you need? What would you want? And a lot of the ladies are like, we just need a place. Like, the community is what we're going to miss. And this kind of goes through the common theme that we've been talking about, identity. So when they lost their F45, a lot of them talked about they didn't have an identity when it came to health and fitness anymore. That was their time and space away from kids, away from work, away from daily tasks and chores. That was their arena to step in and just focus for 45 minutes and train and work on themselves. That's all I wanted to create. Like, I just needed 4 walls and create a space and give them a good workout. And so I landed common theme. I landed at the Parks and Recreation Department over in Howell because I was like, look, like I knew with all my background, like, okay, we need it. I bet you that they have a space I can use. So I called and they're like, yeah, let's get going. And so at that time, I mean, it was a smaller room. It was just like a common purpose room of weights and stuff. And it was good enough to say, hey guys, like I'm, limited space, but I was able to offer an opportunity. And so some of the F45 ladies followed, and I gained some new ladies just from the marketing that the Parks and Recreation Department did for me over at Howell. They were fantastic. So I was able to start stirring up and creating that community back in, I think that was my first classes launched after I ran the New York City Marathon. So back in November.
So this is 6 months ago.
Yeah, 6 months ago. Yes. So that was wild. So I did 2 sessions, a November session and December session, and then in January I just had started my New Year challenge session over at Howell when one of my best friends sent me the Iron Horse link and was like, "Hey, have you seen this? It looks like they're just launching." And that was like in February when you guys just opened.
Yeah, we opened the door. I mean, we got that unit January 1st, and it was an empty concrete space, and we went over there, and for like 3.5 weeks, we just went to war with that place to get it up and ready. And I've wanted to have, like, if you talk to people that have been with me for 15 years, like I've always said that I'll have a martial arts area of this facility, but then I'll have a fitness area. Then we'll have yoga. Then we'll have health and wellness. Then we'll have a recovery center at one point. Then we're going to have mental coaching. We're going to have sports psychologists on staff. We're going to have nutritional guidance. Like the idea of this place is one beacon in the community where anyone that wants to change their life for the better through the martial arts, through fitness, through mental progress, we need more of that. We need more places that remind people that you are not what has happened to you. You're not your current state. You're the potential that exists within you. You just have to be in an environment that pulls that out of you. So it was crazy because Andrew told me right after he met, I don't know if he met you and Nate initially. I think he just met you. I don't know how it's set up, but he came over and he goes, "Man, I just met these people that like, they're the ones, like they just have the same energy that radiates in this building, like the same energy that you carry, the same." He's like, "That's what we need." And I'm like, of course, like your community is, and your culture is established by your people. Your people have to live it, breathe it, believe it. You have to actually be the person. You know what I mean? Like you can feign that you're the trainer. Like I'm trying to articulate this correctly. Like you can't learn how to be a trainer from a textbook. It's got to come from your heart. It's got to come from, like, I look at people and try to see the greatest version of them that could possibly exist and hope that when they look at me and any accomplishments I've done or the energy I carry or the way that I live my life, don't look at me and put me on a pedestal. I want to hold a mirror that there's a version of you out there that would view yourself in the same light.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
like, so when you find people like that, it's just an instant connection. You're like, wow, like these are my people. Because when you bring energy like that together, it's not like an addition, like your energy around my energy, around Andrew's, around Nate. It's not like that plus that. It's a magnetism. It's when you combine people like that under one roof, it's hard to describe in words, but people feel it. The number one thing I get told out here from people that travel from all around the world, all around the country to train here is, man, the environment there is really something special. It's the environment that we remember, because you can train martial arts in a million places. You can train fitness in a million places. People come for the way that they feel before, during, and after. And I feel like that's what you and Nate really capture well. So you hear about Iron Horse, you come out to check it out, and then just, I guess, walk me through from, you just came on board a couple months ago to where you are now to like paint the vision moving forward. Like, is there a certain number that if you're like, you know what, at the end of the day, although I love my job and I'm not saying this disrespectfully at all, if I could get to this and I could just live to spend time with my family, spend time with my loved ones, train other people, bring out the best in them, spread positive energy in the world, set new goals, whether it's the marathons that we talked about internationally, but like if I could get to this, that's what I'm meant to do. Walk me through that.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a good point because it's something that lives in my brain every single day. Nate and I talk about that literally all the time. And so for me, I don't think I could have envisioned it if it wasn't for Iron Horse and where I'm at right now. Nate and I messaged Andrew instantly when my best friend or when my good friend sent me the Iron Horse message of like, hey, this is opening. And I only actually messaged Andrew. I was just trying to find a cool place to go train. Like I wasn't looking for a new place to train people. I asked Andrew, hey, do you have open gym? Like, can I come here and check out? He's like, no, I'm not right now. We don't have, we're just kind of up in the phases, but I'm looking for trainers. I go, oh, interesting. I have, XYZ and Nathan also trains. And so we went the next day to meet Andrew, and walking away after that conversation, I was like, done. Like, I got to do what I need to do to get over here. And it was scary because James, like I had myself set up over at Howell. I didn't need my LLC. I didn't need insurance. I didn't need waivers. They covered everything. It was so easy. They did the marketing. And the first thought in my mind was like, well, what if I fail? What if I make this jump, lose my spot over at Howell, and no one comes and no one follows? But you hit the key like right away about community. The next day I had my, I think I had a Thursday evening class or whatnot, whatever it was. And I remember talking to my my ladies at that time, which only were 6 people. I only 6 people who continuously trained with me over there. It was small. And I was like, look, if I move locations, will you follow me? And they're like, we will literally follow you anywhere. It could be an hour away. I had one of my F45 ladies drive 45 minutes to Howell, and she still does, to come train with me. And she goes, Colleen, you can literally train anywhere. I'm there. And they all are with me till to this day. And so I think the belief of making that jump and then having my open house, which I think you had an event going on that morning. Saturday, March 16th, I remember that because St. Patrick's Day is my favorite holiday, and it was the next day on that Sunday. So Saturday, I had an open house. And I had a wait list. I had like 25 plus ladies show up. And I was like, I can't fit anyone else in here. I have to cut off at 25. And I think that was a moment of looking around and seeing people laugh and high five and smiles and just laughing at how hard the workout was, but having a good time with it and growing with it. I mean, all of that, it just was it was just indescribable moment for Nathan and I, because we both, and he was there. We set up the night before Friday, cleaned everything out, set the tables up, got all our, post-workout or pre-workout lined up, like the signs, everything was exactly the way we wanted it. And I go, what if we could just do this for a living? Like this right here. And that's our dream. That's our dream. I mean, really, I don't know what that number looks like, honestly, James. I mean, part of my thing is making sure my kids are set up for success and having a successful career. If they go we talk about trade school, if they choose to go to college, if they choose to take on and build their own business, whatever that future may be, I just want to make sure they're set up before I can say, okay, I can truly follow this dream, be good at it, but also support them financially.
Makes sense. And we all tell our children to chase their dreams, right? If you have a dream, chase it. What better way to really make that message sit in than to do it yourself? Your kids will remember to some degree what you said. More so, they'll remember who you are. They'll look at you and say, my mom and dad, despite obstacles, despite stress, despite these things, went for their dreams, built it from the ground up, changed a community, built something through a passion project, became successful. That's action. That permeates any layers. A lot of people that are very unfulfilled, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but still tell their kids, like, go out and live your dream. I can't live mine, but go live yours. And it's like the best thing, like there's been a quote on the top of my Facebook for over 10 years, and I'll never change it because it's one of the most impactful quotes ever. And all it says is, truly, the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own self-transformation. And the idea is when you bring the greatest version of yourself to life and the life that you want to create, the ripple effects that has on your family, on your community, on the people that interact with you is so endless that there's nothing greater that you can do than bringing the greatest version of yourself into existence. Caden will hear your words, but he will witness your life. He will witness your actions. So you know what I mean? So like sometimes the fears will try to creep in and they'll tell you, oh, what about this? What about that? It's like you living passionately with your husband, trying to create a beautiful existence is the greatest thing that you could possibly do to inspire your children. You want your kid to grow up one day and go, I've got something I want to do. Yeah. And there is fear and there's doubt and there's anxiety and there's stress, but I'm going to go for it because my mother went for it. because my father went for it. You know what I mean? So it's like my favorite motivational speaker of all time, Les Brown, he says a quote and he says, what you become in the process is more important than the dream. And it's like what you become by going for things like that, the reward is in the journey. The person you become, the type of character that you'll have, and the resiliency and the courage and the faith and all of those things, that changes things forever. You're a different human being for every venture you then move forward into. So it's like, as someone who's chased my dream now for a long time, and life has rewarded me in ways that I couldn't even have imagined, from the broken, depressed kid that I thought, like, why won't life stop beating me up? Like, it's rewarded me 10 times over. But the number one thing that I've done is I've gone for what I believed in. I wasn't afraid to take the chances that most people are like, I don't know if I can do it. You're never going to know that you can do it until you do it. And then when you do it, you'll look back, and at a point in time, you'll be like, thank God for the Colleen that existed at 35 years old that was brave enough to follow her heart into a path that she didn't fully know. And now look at my life. Look at the time that I have to myself. Look at the time that I have with my children. Look at the impact I'm making on the community around me. Look at the love that gets poured into my life, inward and outward, for the people that I interact with and the people that interact with me. Caden has a whole army of people that he can grow up around that value him. You know what I'm saying? Like, so the fear is going to try to whisper to you every day, but you gotta fight that voice with all of those perspectives. You know what I mean? So I am like, what I see from the outside is you and Nate starting the venture into the greatest, like, have you ever read the book The Alchemist?
That's my favorite book. That's my number one book.
What are the odds? I just gave it to a 17-year-old kid who was over at my house who trains here just the other day. I said, you need to read this book. Be the alchemist. Yeah. Be the person that goes into each venture realizing that, like, you're pursuing your personal legend, and it's the greatest thing that you can do. And all the universe conspires to find a way to give you that if you set your heart on the path and you walk towards it. So you find your personal legend, you find your treasure, you know what I mean? So that book is life-changing. I love it so much. So I've rambled now for a little bit, and it's your podcast and not mine. But I see you're me, and like, dreamers have similarities. And I remember being on paths, and it's like, well, do I do this or do I not? And the greatest decisions I ever made were trusting my heart and believing that I was the one. Like, I don't know how else to say it in any other way. I was like, I know that a lot of people fail chasing their dreams, and I know that it's very hard, and I know that I won't know what's going to be around the next corner, but I'm going to make it. Yeah. And like, that has guided me all the way to this point, and it was the greatest decisions I've ever made in my life. So at your current state, just let's say someone was interested in your community or anything like that. Just tell me kind of about your community, what you're doing, the vision that you have mapped out to this point. And then, this is a perfect way to end our first podcast. And then hopefully a couple years down the road, you can reflect back on this conversation and show the life that you have now.
Well, I want to piggyback a little bit of two things that came to mind as you spoke. One, going back all the way to when I was cut from my first soccer team, right, from ODP, had the decision either quit or keep going. When F45 closed down, quit or keep going, right? So those hard moments in life, I wouldn't have pictured when I was in 8th grade to 35 years old making the basically same decision of, do I continue and look where that resulted. If I quit soccer, I would have never played college in soccer. I may have never met Nathan. I may have never had Caden Hudson. All these things. And what you mentioned, ripple effect, that is one of my things I tell my own clients. You do not know the impact you have by showing up and leading by example in this community, because they see it. They want that too. They come and join, and all of a sudden, you're changing and transforming your life. And so one of the things that I live by, that I'm learning, I'm not perfect, but action cures fear. You make it worse in your mind and you build it up. No, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I'm not confident enough. I'm not smart enough. That's just you saying that in your mind. So for me, it's like action cures fear. So when I had that conversation with Andrew about coming in here and thinking, okay, like, and I had a moment, I had a little freak out. I'm like, I have a couple weeks to get my LLC, my waiver, my insurance, all those things set up. But guess what? It wasn't that bad. It took me a couple days, and Nathan looked at me, literally goes, see, you took the action forward. You're set up. Let's do this. And part of it was the fear of, well, what if no one follows me? And then like you mentioned, I had a training session last night. I did not anticipate I should actually had counted numbers before. I was packed to the brim of like, oh my gosh, I might need to add another station, and that's cool. And so for me, like, overall, like, my vision of like what my community as we grow is just welcoming people. And I've had transformers now. I don't call them climates. I call them transformers, because they will transform their life. That's kind of a slogan or that we use through First Phorm. So my transformers, a couple that have already been with me, some of them are down 60 pounds. Like, imagine they talk to their friends, which it's already happened. Like, oh my gosh, you look great. Their whole thing is, I want to lead a healthy life for my family. I want to live a long life, and I want to feel good. I want to be able to go for a walk and not be out of breath. I want to go to a restaurant and choose wisely. And I tell them, it's not about cutting things out of your life. It's just modifying what you're doing. So each choice that you make leads you next step. And so for me, a welcoming community, somewhere you can just come in, walk in, and feel welcomed. I don't want that gym toxicity of like, oh, who can lift the most weight or who's going to be most jacked. No, this is real people with real results, long-term results, living a healthier life for their kids, for their family, for being there for their parents, whatever that may be. And so that's where when people ask me, well, what age do you coach? Anybody. And walk in, I will modify. And so for me, like, I want that to be an open door for anybody who just needs 45 minutes to themselves to be the best version of themselves, to be there to support others and welcome others in. Like, that's it.
I love it. And I said to you and Nate when I first met you, I said the bottom line thing that I aim for in this facility is, like, if you want to be a part of what we're doing here, is you just want to have to aim up in your life. And that's exactly what you're saying. Like, if you want to be a part of this group, I don't care your background, I don't care your fitness level, I don't care your social status, I don't care your race, I don't care your creed, I don't care. I care about, do you want to be a good person, and do you want to aim up in your life? This is going to sound rude on the thing, but like, if you want to be a degenerate, you want to harm people, you want to do these things, you want to get into hard drugs, those are your choices that you can make. But like, that's not what we're doing here. Life is hard enough. There's a million things that cripple people every single day. I've been in horrible depressions. I know how bad life can be. What we're doing in this building is we are aiming up, and we are celebrating the success of other people that are aiming up. That is the way you're meant to live. And the more that you do that, the more that your soul and spirit lights back up, and you realize, like, well, this is it all along. Remember when I was a little kid and I was playing with a group of people and I felt so wonderful? That's what we're trying to do as we all get through this experience. So Team Triez Training, if you don't know, now you know. Just anything else you'd like to capture on this podcast? We filmed over an hour dialogue.
Ooh, didn't even realize.
Over an hour. It goes quick.
Time flies. Last thing I'll say is a space is just a space is what you make it, right? So it's the community, the people you build around you. You can train anywhere. You can train on an alley for all I care. It's about the people who make it. So thanks for having me, James. I love this. This is such a great conversation. I learned more about myself in the hour too as well. So I just appreciate you taking the time and just listening to my story. That truly means a lot to me as well.
No, 100%. I tell everybody, we need more dream chasers. We need more people that want to bring out the best in people. There's always going to be hardship. There's always going to be tough things in life. But the more good people come together and try to bring out the best in one another, it's like it's beating back the darkness. It's a little slap in the face to all the difficult things of life. They're not going anywhere, and we have a limited time on earth. You know what I mean? You get one shot, and you don't get to know if there's a chapter 2, hopefully. But like, we can do our best to do a better job. And so I respect people tremendously, like you and your husband and other people that, like, you're dedicating a lot of your energy to other people. And I believe that it's a part of our soul. Like, we're meant to do that. The feelings you get when you help other people, they're there for a reason. So thank you so much for sitting with me today, Colleen, and we'll wrap this up.
All right. Thank you very much.